In this video, we are going to append data from feature classes and tables in a File Geodatabase to our feature layers and tables in our feature service. Now, there is a bit of a workflow to go through, so make sure you follow along and listen carefully. Open up the append.py script from the add data folder. We're going to use the feature layer object and the table object append methods to append data from a File Geodatabase to our feature layers and our tables in our feature service using the ArcGIS API for Python. Let's head over to documentation for the append method for a feature layer object. Here we have the append method. You can see there are a whole host of parameters here. And if we scroll down, we can get more information on each parameter. We're going to use three of the parameters. We're going to use an item ID that represents a File Geodatabase content item in ArcGIS Online. We're going to add that File Geodatabase content item with the ArcGIS API for Python. We need to set the upload format. We're of course going to use a File GDB, and we'll need the source table name to match the feature class or table from that File Geodatabase to the feature layer or table in our feature service. Make sure to take the time to go through and read some of the other parameters available. For now, I'm going to head back over to our Python script. If you notice up top, we are importing the GIS class, as we always do. We're also importing the item properties and the item type enum from ArcGIS.gis too. The item properties will allow us to define the File Geodatabase content item that we want to add to ArcGIS Online, and item type enum just helps with enumerating the File Geodatabase type. We're importing our feature layer collection class as we have a bit of admin to do in order to use the append method, and I'll get to that in a moment. First of all, we're going to access ArcGIS Online using our GIS class and supplying our home string. We'll set our GIS object as a variable called AGOL. We're going to use our GIS object and access the content manager and use a get method, supplying in our feature service item ID, which I'll paste in now. The get method will return an item object that will assign to a variable called item. Currently, our park status field in our park boundaries feature layer has a length of 10. We've set a domain on this field where the coded domain value is greater than 10 characters. And we've already added data. So let me pop over to ArcGIS Online and show you what I'm talking about. Here I'm in the data tab for our feature service. I'm going to go to our park boundaries. Now if I go to fields on the left and then click into the park status field, we can see here we have our codes and they are greater than 10 characters. We can see the length over here is 10, and we already have two features in this feature layer. We want to update this length to 25. Now we can do that, but when we do it, when there's data already in the feature layer, although it'll say it has a length of 25, it does not honor this. The data set has to be empty in order for us to update our length and for it to stick. If I go back to the table tab, we can see our two entries. So with the field length for park status set to 10, we have data in the incoming File Geodatabase that has characters greater than 10. So when we try to append, although the append will say it was successful, it will not be added because the park status values will break the 10 character limit. So let's head back to our Python script and see how we can work through this. We're creating a feature layer collection object from our item object, and we're assigning that to a variable called FLC. We're now defining a capability dictionary where we have a key of capabilities that represents the capabilities property, and we have removed sync from the capabilities. We are going to truncate our park boundaries feature layer. Below this video, I have a link to a video that describes the truncate in more detail. For now, just follow along. We update our feature layer collection object so that our feature service no longer has sync capabilities. We then access our park boundaries feature layer and we truncate the data. Now that there is no longer any features in our park boundaries feature layer, we can update our park status field. And here we're going to update the length to 25. And take note that you should be supplying in the full field definition in order to update the length. We then use our feature layer update definition method to commit the update to our park status field. Once we've updated the field and the length to 25, we are reinstating the sync capability for our feature service. So we create a new capability dictionary and we update the feature layer collection, and our sync is back in operation. Okay, so we have truncated our data. Now, luckily, the incoming File Geodatabase has those two features that are going to be re-added. I've just done that to make this process a bit smoother, but just be very careful when you are truncating data. Once it's deleted, it is gone. The point here was to show you the difficulty that once you have set the schema and applied lengths to string fields, and that you've added data to that feature layer, that is very difficult to update that field without having to do further workflows. Anyway, let's move on to the main event where we're going to add File Geodatabase data to our feature layers and our tables in our feature service. We have a path here to a zipped File Geodatabase, and I'm showing the contents here on screen. Each of the feature classes and the tables match a feature layer and table in our feature service. We need to add this zipped File Geodatabase as a content item in ArcGIS Online before we can append the contents to our feature layers and tables. We use our GIS object and the content manager folders property, which is a folders object, and we call the get method supplying in none to access our root folder or our home folder, however you want to call it. You could also put in a folder name there to place this File Geodatabase content item in a named folder. The folders.get method returns a folder object that we're going to assign to a variable called folder. We then create an item properties dictionary where we're using our item properties class that we've imported. We're going to set the title of the content item to extra parks data, and the item type, we're going to use the item type enum File Geodatabase dot value to define that it is a File Geodatabase content item being added. Then we use the folder object add method, supplying in our items property object as the item properties parameter and the zipped File Geodatabase path as the file parameter. If we use the result method at the end of our add, we will get the item object for the item that has just been added. I'm going to assign that to a variable called GDB item. We'll print GDB item to screen just to show that it is a File Geodatabase item object. Now that we have a File Geodatabase item object, we can start appending the data from the feature classes and tables to our feature layers and tables in our feature service. We need to get the Geodatabase item ID. So we call our GDB item, which is the item object for our File Geodatabase, and get the ID and assign to a variable called GDB item ID. We're first going to append to our trail viewpoints. So we use our item object, which is our feature service. We're accessing the layers property, which returns a list of layer objects. And we want the first feature layer object, which is our trail viewpoints. I'm going to assign that to a variable called FL for feature layer. We're now going to use the feature layer append method to append from the GDB to the feature layer. I've created a variable called status, and I'm going to call our feature layer object and the append method. We're going to set the item ID to be our GDB item ID. We set the upload format to be file GDB that we saw in the documentation. And we set the source table name to be trail viewpoints. That is the name of the feature class in the File Geodatabase that we want to append the data from. And then print the feature layer name to screen and the status to see if it was a successful append. We're also going to do the same for our park trails, our park boundaries, and for our tables. Instead of using a feature layer object, we're using a table object. I'll call the table object append method that has the same parameters as our feature layer append method. And we're appending in for our park maintenance information and our viewpoint reviews. Okay, quite a lot there. Let's run the script and then check out the result. The script is complete. We can see that we have a new item object that is a File Geodatabase, and the name of it is Extra Parks Data. And this is now a content item in our ArcGIS Online. We appended to all our feature layers and our tables, and were returned true for each append, indicating that the appends were successful. So let's head over to ArcGIS Online and check it out. First, I'm going to go back to my Content tab. And we can see here we have added the Extra Parks Data as a File Geodatabase item. I'll click into my Park Trails. I'm going to go to the Data tab. First up, we have our trail viewpoints, and we can see that more have been added. If I go to our Park Trails, we'll see the same. For our park boundaries, we did initially truncate the bottom two, but they were, luckily, wink wink, in the File Geodatabase data. We also appended to our park maintenance information, which is a table, along with our viewpoint reviews. So we've successfully used the ArcGIS API for Python to append from a File Geodatabase to our feature service. Now, it is very, very important that the schema of the data that has been appended matches the schema of your feature layer and tables in the feature service. You can click into the Visualization tab, and we can see our appended data. Make sure to continue on to the next video in this series, and also make sure to subscribe. Take care.